Hi everyone, this is Nick Mueller, your writing mentor for English 105. In this video, I'm going to discuss the Digital Portfolio Review Worksheet. And this worksheet includes the post-course reflection, and it also includes the overall remainder of the portfolio, the overall outlook for multimodality and design, as well as the archive of coursework, and also conventions audience awareness. So there's a lot to keep track of, which is why this syllabus, this rubric has so many items in it. Scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. And really, that's the bad thing about the rubric, and it's also the good thing about the rubric. You know exactly what you're supposed to put in here. Think of this as a checklist as much as it is a rubric, because this section, for instance, multimodality and design, entire portfolio, for instance, corresponds to this whole section of the portfolio worksheet. So when you're sending your link out to your education portfolio, feel free to give yourself a peer review. Be your own best peer. You're the person who composed your portfolio. You're the person who composed your post-course reflection. You can even bring in a family member, because that's what family members are for, right? Or even a friend if they're willing. So even someone who isn't familiar with the habits of mind, isn't familiar with multimodality that much, can go through this as a checklist, just like you, just like me, and see what's in there and see what's missing. All right, let's get to the actual prompts here in the worksheet. Question 1 for the post-course reflection. How does the author discuss and include evidence of their evolution of their understanding and practice of the WPA learning outcomes for this course? Okay, first of all, when it comes to evidence, I'm a big fan of making it as multimodal as possible. Like I really like having those 2-for-1s, and the WPA outcomes it's no different whether you're writing about how your writing processes have changed, how it changed from project 1 to project 2 to composing this multimodal portfolio. When it comes to learning conventions or how you view genre conventions, those are all ways for you to show how you've progressed in the WPA learning outcomes, whichever ones you've chosen. Maybe the ones you chose in your pre-course reflection are different from the ones you find challenging now, and maybe the ones you found or thought you were strong at the outset, maybe that's less so the case, or maybe it's the same. Either way, you can provide multimodal examples to answer these questions, basically. Here's an invitation to say yes or no and give a specific rationale, preferably quoting some specific page within the portfolio and some aspect of that page to back up your assertion. Question 2. How does the author discuss and include evidence of the evolution of their understanding and practice of the habits of mind? Same deal as with the WPA outcomes, really. Conveniently, I have the habits of mind section listed here. Have you discussed 2 of the habits of mind that you've worked on for project 2? Have you done this? Have you done this? And to what extent have you demonstrated your learning? Because that's the goal of this learning contract rubric. Has it been pretty minimal, or has it been above and beyond? If you're aiming for a 3, if you're aiming to demonstrate that level of learning, what can you do to challenge yourself even more, to go beyond the standard of a 2? How does the author discuss and include evidence of the transfer of writing and multimodal skills to other contexts? Okay, if I had written this worksheet, this would be number 1, because every instructor I've worked with has made a big deal about how important the transfer aspect of metacognition is. Metacognition, of course, is one of the habits of mind. And what we hope for all of you is that you take these, experiences working with big picture issues in writing, like genre, conventions, evidence, how you can compose in a way that's more than just putting words on the page, how you can compose in multi-genre ways that bring in the benefits of 2 or more genres. So yeah, just like the question before, provide evidence for why you're saying yes, no, maybe so. So yeah, transfer of writing can be non-academic. Something that is underrated is like that could include your text messages to family members and friends about what you're doing here in 105. From work, if you've look back on some text message or social media posts you've made later in this session, that could be a good source of multimodal evidence for transfer of writing and multimodal skills for that matter. How does the author discuss and include evidence of their growth as writers in the theory of writing section of the reflection? So yeah, I would encourage you, if you're getting stuck on this theory of writing section, because it is generally the hardest for students in the portfolio or when you're trying to revise it, I would recommend checking out my theory of writing videos. There are like 6 of them, and they've been interspersed in the newsletters I've been posting and the announcements. So if you haven't checked those out, you're looking to get unstuck, looking to get inspired a little bit, you can get some theory of inspo writing from there. Invitation to say your piece, to provide a rationale for what you're saying, offering specific evidence from this part of your peer's portfolio. All right. Multimodality and design. This is like for the portfolio as a whole, I believe, not just for the post-course reflection. How has the author used decisions such as selection of background color, design, use of images consistent, and purposeful usage of fonts, headers, and typefaces to strengthen the visual organization of the content? I get a couple things when I read this question. One is, are these individual elements harmoniously employed? Is there a harmony among the parts? And of course, is there a harmony among the different pages of your multimodal portfolio, from the archive of your coursework to your welcome page to your about you page, etc. And think of these as part of as yet another checklist and another source by which to demonstrate design strength. Because if you've got like Times New Roman throughout your portfolio, and it's all 12-point, well, there could be some opportunities for you there to distinguish your portfolio by way of typefaces that are still very readable, yet offer a little more character and show a little bit more purposeful design. Another thing I get out of this question is the content and design. Sometimes the content parallels the design. If we're looking at a really upbeat flower shop's webpage, well, the color palette is going to be pretty bright and shiny, right? Pretty welcoming, open, warm colors, and so forth. Would that work for a funeral home? Probably not. It would be somber, and so a funeral home would, of course, have somber, dignified coloration and so forth. Likewise with typefaces and fonts. So there's that case would be parallel too. For my multimodal portfolio, my topic was pretty serious. I went with a lighter, more kind of neutral design theme. It's kind of like more nature and more tangible than the topic I chose for projects 1 and 2. How has the author included evidence to support their claims of learning in a number of modalities? Okay, so I mentioned like text messages earlier. Screenshots can work really well too, because you've probably all done a fair amount of research for projects 1 and 2. If you harken back to your search history and You can reflect on if there's like some image or on a web page that really grabbed you, or some way that a web page is really arranged that you found it really persuasive or emotionally affecting. That could be something to take a screenshot of and include in your portfolio. And the same goes for embedded content like videos and audios. Sometimes that's on web pages and on social media as well. So yeah, think of this as, again, as a checklist of ways you can boost the presence of multimodality in your portfolio, not just your peers' portfolio. All right? Be specific, give evidence, offer specific suggestions. It's okay to do that. Like, you're not just being negative by saying, hey, this could make things better. Like, that's 100% productive. And, you know, we definitely welcome that kind of feedback. The third question of this section: what choices for the design and display of evidence has the author used to complement the rhetorical structure of the reflections? Okay, so this kind of speaks to what I said a moment ago about how we organize our content, right? The reflections follow more or less the same format as each other. You've got the habits of mind, the WPA outcomes, and the theory, the theory of writing for each reflection. So it could be nice to have those harmonized in some way, like what sort of elements, like these things are you deploying to make your reader, Dr. Sigler, and to some extent myself, you know, aware that you've read the design principles reading, that you're doing your best to use these individual elements together in a unified way to make your work, your reflections on the habits of mind and WPA outcomes and your own theory of writing, to make those stand out and shine as best as possible. Yeah, so when you're answering this for your peers, again, be specific, you know, and focus on this interconnected element. If you have the time at all, go back and look at your peers' pre-course reflection, look at their mid-course reflection. If they're not carrying something over to their post-course or some post-course reflection, then you can say that. You say, hey, I really like this element in your mid-course reflection. Why not include it in your post-course reflection? It really did X, Y, and Z for me as a reader. Archive of coursework. This is probably the most straightforward part here. Is it there or is it not there? And that's true for this question, this question, and this question. So we want to see embedded coursework. That's what this translates to, not hyperlinked. So if something is missing, be specific about what's missing. Didn't mean to do that. How has the author archived and organized coursework in purposeful, clear, and reader-centered ways that reveal rhetorical awareness and arrangement? Now, I'm going to talk about arrangement first, because this is actually a fancy rhetorical term from a long time ago. Arrangement refers to how you've set out the facts for your reader. If something funny, amusing, absurd happens to me while I'm out and about, and I tell that story to a friend who happens to call me that later that same day, I'll retell that story in a way that's specific to that friend. And if I talk to, say, my 77-year-old mother, even later that same day, well, I'll probably tell that story, the facts of that story, in a way that's more suitable to the fact that my mom is my mom and that she's 77 years old. So the facts haven't necessarily changed. It's a matter of how we presented them for our audience. So this is really a question of audience awareness here. So reader-centered ways, to me, with my really poor vision, that means I'm medically blind without glasses, so that means a font that's not something wild like papyrus. It could, a font like Calibri, if it's big enough, a font like, Times New Roman, not this crazy cursive one, Cambria, Carlito, the school book, the clear, not, sans serif ones. Comic Sans is a no-go. If it says condensed, that's hard to read for anyone who's in my position, vision-wise. So, and not just that, so not just the font, not just the font size, but think of in terms of your text, any given page of your multimodal portfolio as a visual. Is there a visual hierarchy that's going to tell a reader, hey, go here first, then here, and then the content parallels that visual hierarchy that you've given them, and everything is copacetic. Like you've made things easy for your reader and they don't even know it yet. So is your peer doing that? Are they not doing that? How could they do it? Let them know. How does the author contextualize the material housed within each content area's landing page? In other words, how is each statement of learning and supporting evidence presented and explained by the author? Okay, so this can also apply pretty well to not just the archive of coursework in your multimodal portfolio where it says Project 1, invention stuff, Project 2, invention stuff, rough draft, revised draft, like that. This is valid for that section of your portfolio, but also think of this question in terms of your course reflections. Why is that? Because just like that archive of coursework section I've described for Project 1 and 2, your course reflections follow the same format as one another. Same for the pre-course reflection as the mid-course reflection, same for the post-course reflection as the mid-course reflection. So you might want to make those parallel one another in as much as insofar as it is appropriate to do so, to make clear your statements of learning, to emphasize what you really mean to emphasize, and to provide appropriate evidence. Making use of digitation's affordances. You can set an image off to the side. You can arrange it so that you have a few blocks of text, but you have space for an image or audio or video in between those blocks to help with reader engagement, to help maintain readability. So think of this in terms of the reflections as well. All right. Last section here. Thank you for bearing with me. I hope you're finding this very useful. Conventions and audience awareness. Does the author attend to all necessary conventions of documentation and surface features like grammar, spelling, and mechanics within all portfolio content? This is not necessarily an invitation to let your inner grammar and spelling maven out. Only let that person out if these things, grammar, spelling, and mechanics, get in the way of meaning. If it appears to get in the way of meaning, if it's like a consistent mistake all throughout the portfolio that's grammatical or spelling, that they can just, fix in one go more or less. If they know how to use Microsoft Word, by all means, bring that up. But if it's like a comma splice, or you feel like, there should be semicolons for that list instead of commas in a list, well, it could be worth, holding back on that if it doesn't necessarily affect the meaning that your peer, that your fellow author is attempting to transmit. Conventions of documentation, of course, also is a fancy way of saying, did they use APA enough? And I know a lot of us are struggling with APA, so if you're like an APA master, by all means share that knowledge. If you've got some resources to share that help you understand an issue regarding APA, by all means share that. Put it in the community forum. How has the author's choice of voice, tone, and style met the rhetorical needs of an identified target audience while maintaining and reinforcing a clear purpose? For me, I would say, is this accessible? Like, I won't go so far to say it's open and welcoming, because sometimes the confrontational tone can work well if it's thoughtfully applied and selectively applied with a purpose. So otherwise, just like the font, just like design, is it readable? Is it accessible? Does it make the meaning easily communicable to the audience you're trying to reach, which is educated people who are okay with reading it a little bit, people who are curious enough to go to college and learn new things. I know that's kind of general, but that is part of your audience, more or less, and because we're all doing these peer reviews, right? And also Dr. Figler. Dr. Figler is part of your audience. He's got a doctorate in English, so he's aware of all these style, tone, voice. He understands these questions in this worksheet just as well as I do, probably even better. So that said, he's a reasonable guy. I'm a reasonable guy. Your peers are, as far as I can tell, all reasonable people. So let's go forth with this worksheet and help each other succeed as best we can, all right? Please let me know if you have any questions by way of my email, npmuell1@asu.edu, or you can hit me with a message via Canvas. All right, that's everything from me. Thank you for listening.